Welcome into the Men Are Forged podcast. I'm your host, Cartwright Morris. The Men Are Forged platform and each episode on this podcast is for the forging of men into great leaders. We are all about men stepping into their God-given leadership abilities and calling, whether that's work, life, or relationships. So if you enjoy this podcast, please like, follow, or subscribe. You can go to menareforged.com to find out if you're a good fit for my Leaders Collective, a group of leaders growing together. So go to menareforged.com. Today's interview is with Jem Fuller. That's Jem Fuller. You can check out more about Jem at jemfuller.com. Jem is the author of the book, The Art of the Conscious Communication for Thoughtful Men. You can find out more about his book on YouTube with his TEDx talk. Yeah, Jem is actually a very thoughtful guy. We had a great conversation deconstructing some of our masculine mindsets, trying to understand more of the masculine psyche and how we can put down a lot of our comparison, our false sense of ego and pride, and actually live a life that we really want. So you can check out more about Jem Fuller at jemfuller.com. And here's today's interview. All right, got another great episode today of Men Are Forged. Jem Fuller. Like most Australian names, my southern accent just doesn't quite do it justice. I know, so I think it's Jem. Did I sound better like that, or is it Jam?
I reckon, Cartwright, you should just say it however you say it, man. That's how it should be said.
Well, Jem, I appreciate you coming on. I'm excited to have you. You did tell me a little tidbit that is I'm excited because I've been there, but I would love for you just to describe my audience where you live.
Yeah, it was cool, man. When you said to me, "Oh, I've been there, the Great Ocean Road," and I said, "That's my address." I live on a farm on the Great Ocean Road. It's a coastal town. It's a small town, and surfing is the main thing here. The waves are awesome, especially yesterday. They were just stunning. So yeah, me and my teenage boys surf a lot. We hang out on this farm. It's a wool farm. We don't run the farm. There's a farmer who runs his sheep here. And life's pretty good down here. We've been pretty lucky. The state that I live in Australia, we experienced the longest, strictest lockdowns through the last couple of years, restrictions, anywhere in the world, I've been told. And Melbourne, so the city of Melbourne, they were locked down extensively, man, for a couple of years, So it's been pretty tough, especially for the people in the city. But for us folk down here on the farm, it wasn't too bad. We could still get around outdoors and, our bubble, we had to stay in a family bubble. But, I come from a pretty big family and we all kind of locked down together. So it was all right.
That's great. And what a great spot to be, though, in the midst of it. It's hard as it is, I guess, been for people, but to be right there by the coast and shred it up, Hopefully they didn't make y'all wear a mask out there.
Oh, we were wearing masks everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, even walking along the cliff top, we've got these beautiful walks along the cliffs above the ocean. And everywhere we went, we had to wear masks.
Oh, man. I appreciate you coming on. This is exciting just to dive in, Jem. So, first off, I love to just unpack, just to hear more of your backstory of just how it led to who you are and what you're doing now. Author of the book, The Art of the Conscious
Communication for Thoughtful Men. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
I get so bad about that, Jem. But so I'd love to hear just early on, adolescence, what were some mindsets, what were some big changes that really kind of set your course into adulthood?
Yeah. Look, I think I've done a lot of reflection on this stuff, and that's why I was really keen to come on your show, because I think the conversation that you are facilitating is a really important one, and the journey of boy to man, and which is still a journey of discovery for me. I'm turning 51 in a few weeks, and so I feel like I'm kind of halfway, has been, full of ups and downs. There've been some downs that were really, really down, like almost giving up kind of down. And so I've done a lot of reflection on it, and also writing the book, obviously. But, I've been sitting in men's circle for about 12 years now, where there's a group of us men and we sit around a fire and we pick a theme to talk about. There's no drinking or smoking or anything like that. It's just sitting around a fire with some water and really good, solid conversation around what it is for us as our experience of being men. So I've been in these later years, over the last decade, been doing a lot of reflection and thinking and putting pieces together. So, when I look back over my life, and to answer your question, back to adolescence, it's actually even one step further than that back. When I was 6 years old, my father lost his temper and kind of beat me up, not too badly, but, lost his temper and got physical with me and threw me around the room and scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And that was my loss of innocence. That when I was 6 years old is when I kind of, and from that point on, I didn't realize this at the time. I only figured this out when I had my midlife awakening, I call it.
Yeah.
A lot of people call it a midlife crisis, in my early 40s. And I figured it out that's when I first started believing that I wasn't enough. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't enough for the man on the pedestal, for my father. So with the benefit of hindsight, I've kind of figured that out. And so my adolescent years really were a reaction to my father. I didn't want to be my dad. And I loved him. He died 12 years ago, and we were completely reconciled before he died. But I loved him dearly, but I also abhorred a lot of his behavior. There was a lot of the way that he was that I just did not want to be. So I really rebelled, man. I was piercing my ears and wearing a mohawk and wearing punk clothes. And, when I finished high school, when I was 18, I just took off as far as I could. I went to the other side of the world. And I then subsequently spent all of my 20s and into my 30s just traveling.
Yeah.
And the countries that I wanted to travel to were as different from where I grew up as possible. I wasn't really interested in traveling. I mean, I've been to the States quite a few times, but in my 20s, I wasn't really interested in traveling around America because America and Australia are very similar.
Right.
I wanted to go to Tibet. I wanted to go to Bangladesh. I wanted to go to all through Asia and Pakistan and places really different to where I grew up, So that was that journey, and throw into the mix in my 20s, my first identity crisis in my late 20s, where I, who I thought I was kind of all fell apart when I was living in London one time. But yeah, man. So adolescent years, I think, really to sum up, were a reaction to my father.
Right. And you hit on something that's really interesting. Just the whole idea of your innocence being stolen. And I think as men, we think of that word in the context of youth, naive, but really, like, unfortunately, what happens in our childhood is usually someone intentionally or unintentionally takes that from us. But then in adulthood, we start stripping that from ourselves because we associate it with youth, but really how beautiful our innocence is.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, your process of why using that language.
Today's episode is brought to you by Thrive Marriage Lab. If you want your marriage to thrive, this is a great opportunity to you. Because strong marriages are the bedrock of strong churches, organization, families, and community. This is a 12-month pathway for any of you that are looking to really have weekly engagement with experienced marriage counselors. Not just one, but many. So go to restory.life/thrive to get on the waiting list for this great program that starts in April. That's restory.life/thrive. And make sure you put the word Forge in the promo code to receive a discount on your monthly fee. Now, back to the episode.
Look, I think it happens to all of us one way or another. We go through life, and especially as when we're children, there's a period of time where life is just wondrous. It's just everything's new and fresh, and like I'm watching my niece and my nephew at the moment, who are 3 and 1.
Yeah.
And you just watch them wandering around the farm, and everything is just a big, massive playground of new adventures.
Yeah.
And then something will happen. There's these events that happen, and then because we're meaning-making machines, right? We make everything mean something.
Right.
And there'll be something that happens, and to some degree, it's traumatic for a child.
Mm-hmm.
And then subconsciously, that there's a cynicism that starts to form. And I think this must be very natural because it happens to all of us.
Right. Mm-hmm.
In some way, shape, or form. So I don't think it's necessarily a good or a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just life. It's just what happens. But what I've found, after, it's almost 10 years of running my own coaching practice now, so thousands of hours of coaching, mm-hmm. there are some common human behavioral patterns that form.
Right.
And one of them is this questioning of, am I enough?
Yeah.
Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I fast enough? Am I
mm-hmm.
clever enough? Am I enough? Do I deserve happiness and success? The imposter syndrome comes from this.
Yeah.
When we get really successful, we're kind of waiting for someone to tap us on the shoulder and go, you don't deserve this.
Right.
We're taking it away from you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You hear famous people talk about this. They have these moments where they're like, do I really deserve this?
Mm-hmm.
And this is very human. And so, that happened for me, and it happened subconsciously. I wasn't even aware of it. I was pretending to myself and to the outside world that I was fine and everything was wonderful. And then, through my marriage, that began to deteriorate to some pretty lonely, very, very sad and dysfunctional places that were very mm-hmm. private. I was so ashamed that I thought I was alone.
Right.
So I didn't share them with anyone. I just carried this burden of my deepest anxieties, and I kept it all to myself for a long period of time.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. The imposter syndrome, that made me sit there and think, like, I want to say I heard a stat recently, like 80% of U.S. business owners deal with imposter syndrome.
Right.
Like I don't deserve this.
Yeah.
I'm unworthy of this. That language in itself, it's amazing when people say that out loud. It's like a wave of emotion. Imagine you've experienced in your coaching sessions.
Yeah. Lots of it. And the funny thing is, man, that we fall apart in comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm not enough because I should be more like him.
Yeah.
We fall apart in this comparison thing. And what I've figured out, and I'm not the first person to figure it out, but I had to figure it out for myself, is that you are exactly enough to be you.
Yeah.
Right. You are the right amount of absolutely everything to be you. And you shouldn't be more like anyone else, because you're not anyone else. You're you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's who you should be, because that's who you are, is just you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at it like that, if Cartwright, if you and I took a snapshot in time, if we could take a freeze frame right now, you are exactly who you should be.
Yeah.
You're doing the perfect job of being you, perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And I know this 100% unequivocally. I know this to be true. Why? Because reality told me. Because there you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can argue with reality if you want to. There's one of your fellow country people, Byron Katie, and she says, you can argue with reality if you want, but reality will win only 100% of the time.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth, man? But other things come in and make us think we're
not enough.
Yeah. Like what, money, anything, external things, job, success.
Yeah.
So give me, you mentioned something about the turning point in your 20s.
That was the first of 2 identity crises I've had in my life, death of ego. And the one in my 20s was pretty scary, man, because I'd never been through it before. So I didn't realize that it was actually an identity opportunity. actually an opportunity to redesign who I wanted to be, how I wanted to identify who I thought I was. But I didn't know that at the time. And so late 20s, living in London, all of the things I'd identified with, I was an actor, and that was my sense of identity, and I was her partner. We'd been a couple since we were 19. So the things that I'd identified with had all kind of fallen away. And there I was in London with a broken heart, first proper broken heart, late 20s. And I'd become this, in trying to rebel and be anti-establishment, I'd become something that then seemed to be ridiculous to me. I had pierced, this is back in the 1990s.
Oh, yeah.
So quite a while ago. And I had piercings in my lip, and I had multicolored dreadlocks, and kind of, and I got to the point where I had a stutter. I was, the drug usage, the recreational drug usage from parties on the weekend had started to creep into the week, and I was becoming a drug addict with heavy drugs, not just pot. And I would look in the mirror and I would just see ugliness. I'd look in the mirror and I didn't know who I was. I just looked at this person and thought, who are you? What are you doing?
Right.
And I hit rock bottom. That was one of the times I hit rock bottom. And my sister was my angel in that time. My sister was living in Europe, and she flew into London, and she came and found me, and she saw that I was a mess. And she was like, wow, Jem, what are you doing? Remember, you're here saving money to get back to India. At the time, I had this massive love affair with India. And she said, I'm going to be in Varanasi in December. Why don't you come and meet me? So I bought a ticket to India and, saved up enough money to wander around India for another year or two without working, just living pretty basically. And that was that. And so then I got to rebuild. Then this year was actually quite stunning, and I got to re-identify. Yeah. So that was the first of two times when I've had this kind of catharsis.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've mentioned also just the different being attracted to the East and not being in the Western culture. Yeah, just real quickly, I'd love just to hear what was your initial attraction to more Eastern culture and leaving Western? Yeah,
I think it was initially it was just adventure.
Yeah,
I just wanted the adventure, but over the years of traveling and again now looking back retrospectively and making some sense out of it, I was really attracted to cultures that were foreign to ours and finding a way to connect. It was really about connection, essentially, but cross-cultural connection, and this is something that I've become quite passionate about now, in that, despite the differences, when you look a little bit more closely, we've got so much in common.
Yeah.
We have got the basics in common. Regardless of where you grew up, regardless of your faith, regardless of your culture, regardless of the food that you eat, regardless of all of that, we bleed the same color blood. We need shelter. We need food and water. We both feel the pain of loss when a loved one dies.
Yeah.
If you're a parent, your children are the most important humans to you in the world. We've got these things in common. And when we can remember that and connect with those fundamentals, then we can explore and harness diversity.
Yeah.
Then we can really use diversity to help solve the bigger problems. When we can remember that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty passionate about that, because humans forget that, man. Humans, I love humanity, but I also, it's also hard to watch humans do such silly things, and fighting with each other over a different political idea. Or I don't know about you, man, but have you noticed in the last 2 years, I've seen families fall apart and disown each other because of a difference of opinion of vaccination. A difference of opinion.
Wow.
Like one family member thinks that we should be vaccinated and the other family member thinks that we shouldn't. And they have ended their relationship forever because of identifying with a different idea.
Yeah.
That to me is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're allowed to disagree and still love each other,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I look back now and me going to these different places was really about adventure and connection with people who seemed really different to me. And I've still got those connections. There's a family up in the Himalayan mountains of remote northwest India, who I became a member of their family, 25 years ago. And then over the last 10 years, prior to travel restrictions, my partner and we run leadership retreats up in the Himalayan mountains, and we take people to this village where we've built a little school, and we've funded an education program around rubbish collection, etc. And this family is still my family there, so we go there every year. So yeah, man.
Wow. So what was that year? You said you had that rock bottom, and then you came to India for a whole year. What was some of the bigger lessons you've learned or things you discovered about yourself in that year?
Letting go. Letting go. And letting go, which is now has become a habitual practice for me psychologically. Yeah. Letting go. But that year, for me, I got to India. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know who I wanted to be. And so I thought, right, I'm going to run an experiment. I'm going to let go of all future design. Yeah. Completely. I don't know where I'm going to go tomorrow. I don't know whether I'll stay here or whether I'll move on. And if I do move on, I don't know where I'm going to move to, as in traveling around India. When people ask me, what do I do? I'm just going to say, because that's what you meet someone, you go, hey, I'm Jem. They go, hey, I'm Cartwright. They go, what do you do? Yeah. It's one of the first questions everyone asks. Like, this is your sense of identity, your job.
Everybody hates it too.
And I was like, I don't do anything. I'm here to make it easier to, to have a two-dimensional conversation with someone. I would say I travel. I'm a traveler. And that was it. That was it. So by letting go of trying to hold on to anything, trying to hold on to a sense of identity, or letting go of trying to hold on to a plan, right? So tomorrow I'm going to get the 9:15 train, and I'm going to get that train to Delhi, and then I'm going to get from Delhi, I'm going to get a bus to here. Letting go of all of that. And what happened was the most remarkable year of flow. Yeah. It was incredible, man. I don't know if you've been to India, but India tests people and your patience, right? Especially Westerners who like things to go as they should go. Right. We expect that if there's a 9:15 train, there's a 9:15 train. Not in India. You turn up somewhere and it takes you 6 hours to buy a ticket. You go to the bank to do a simple transaction in a bank, and you've got to go to 10 different banks just to do the most simple of transactions, right? Oh, wow. So India is known for testing your patience, and things that seem logical to us are illogical over there, and vice versa. So it's a pretty interesting place to travel. But in this particular year where I let go of all design and surrendered, then it was remarkable flow. I would walk up to the train station, and just as I would arrive, the train was leaving, and I'd get on the train, and it was seamless. At least my perception of it was seamless. So that was beautiful. I got to re-identify. I got to heal my broken heart. I got to enjoy a year of contemplation and self-discovery, self-inquiry, and really learning to, for the first time, and I forgot this in subsequent chapters, but for the first time learning to love myself and ease up on myself and not be so hard on myself. Yeah. Which I forgot then, because got married and had kids and went into the corporate world, and then really discovered some more rock bottom stuff, some years later.
So yeah, you talked about re-identifying. Was that the guy you shifted towards, or was there more of a positive person then that was kind of stripped away amidst of life, kids, corporate, all that?
Yeah, there was more of a positive person. Look, I've generally, I'm painting what could be construed as a bleak picture. I've generally been a pretty upbeat guy. Yeah. Throughout my life, I've generally been pretty happy and pretty happy-go-lucky, and, life's been pretty fun.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, you've done a lot. I mean, London, India, Australia, all that in itself right there.
I've packed it. Yeah, there's a whole lot more I somehow packed in, but you know, I've generally been pretty jovial. But I'm pointing out for your listeners that there's been a couple of times of real darkness, and then coming through those, you know. And so I finished towards the end of my traveling years. I met my wife, the woman who became my wife. And we kept traveling for a few more years, and then we wanted to have kids. And when we had kids, I was like, wow, I better get a job, go get a real job. I was in my early 30s. I had no qualifications. I had no career. I'd never been in a job for more than a year. I'd done everything under the sun, from tattooist, fire dancer, motorcycle courier, you know, lots of different things. And anyway, so we had kids, and I didn't know what to do. So I got a job with a travel company, international travel company. Fast forward 8 years of climbing that corporate ladder, wearing a suit and tie. And my friends all thought I was a lunatic because they'd never seen me in a tie. And yeah, so I did that. And along the way, I mean, I ended up in senior leadership and running quite a large division of a company, and losing my true values, losing my true sense of who I am, who I think I am, or who I choose to be in that corporate rat race that I'd avoided for my earlier chapters. You know, I was anti-establishment. I didn't want a part of it.
Wow.
You know, I was full punk, didn't want to be a part of it at all. So yeah, then I lost myself in the rat race, funnily enough, and put all of my anxieties and all of my self-doubt and all of my self-loathing into what the very intimate part of your life, which is lovemaking, sex. And very sadly, in my marriage, that just got worse and worse for me. And you know, I became sexually dysfunctional. And I was so ashamed. Yeah. You know, I didn't tell anybody because it was just the most embarrassing thing for a man to be able to not be able to function like that. You know, it was like, to me, it was all of my manhood was eroding in front of me. And I was so embarrassed, I didn't tell anyone about it. So I was pretending to be happy to the outside world. You know, I had this great job. I was earning good money. We were building a house. I was married. We had 2 kids. And to the outside world, I was living the dream. But deep inside, for me, it was a nightmare. And it got really bad. It got to the point where, you know, our marriage, we couldn't save it, you know. And then enter the midlife. People call it a midlife crisis. Again, for me, it feels like it was a midlife awakening in my early 40s. But I had to go through that change, and to come to where I am now, almost 10 years later, I had to lose everything. Lost the marriage. I lost my career. I lost my house. I lost everything except my kids. I kept my kids week on, week off. Yeah. So, you know, 50-50 with the kids. But apart from that, man, I had 1 surfboard, 1 guitar, and a whole bunch of debt. Right. Wow. It's taken me the last 10 years to get out of debt and start creating abundance, and to be living my true path and my true vocation. You know, but I had to really go to the bottom, and then the way out of that for me was to learn to radical self-acceptance, radical self-love, you know, and to rewire the neurology of I'm not enough. I had to go to work on myself. And I hate to say this, there's no quick fix. You can't just take the blue pill and everything's better. You've got to do the work and create habitual practices. You know, it's habitual for me now to look at myself in the mirror and say, hey, mate, I love you. You're all right. You're enough. Just keep going, keep doing good work, keep finding ways to contribute to the lives of others. You know, and so it's habitual for me to do that now. But initially, I didn't even believe it. I'd say to myself, I'm good enough just the way I am, but I didn't believe it. I had to put that on high repeat, so that the neurons would wire together, and you start to believe your own hype, you know, and then everything starts to change. You know, so I mean, you know, we hear these stories of how when you change your beliefs, life changes. Yeah. It's actually true. It's actually true. Yeah. You know, like when I started to believe I was good enough, everything started to, and I've done the work. I've been working hard at my vocation, but abundance is here. You know, I'm earning ridiculously good money, doing good work, and with my head held high because I'm on my path, the path I'm supposed to be on. I love what I do. My relationships have gone through the roof. You know, I had to come out of my marriage, but once I had created the belief that I am good enough and I deserve all happiness and all abundance and everything, this amazing woman showed up in my life.
Yeah.
You know, my relationship now is next level conscious. It's easy. It's loving. We never fight.
Yeah.
The love making is next level awesome. You know, it's beautiful, you know, and my relationship with my kids, you know, my ability as a father has gone through the roof, you know, as a son, as a brother, as a friend, as a coach.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm, you know, pinch myself every day with gratitude for how wonderful my life is now. But it's important, like, if I'm sharing my story, I want men to know that I almost gave up in those years gone by.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
But you can turn it around, and you're not alone. You know,
Yes.
part of the healing process for me was sharing. Because like I said to you, I kept it as a secret, private torture forever because I thought I was the only one. I looked at all the men that I knew and went, oh, these guys are all studs. They're all fine. They're all confident. But it's not true necessarily.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I started to speak up and share my vulnerability, other men would come to me and say, wow, you too? You know, I've had my version of that. And I realized I wasn't alone. And, you know, there's only so much healing you can do on the island. You know, we're communal creatures, man. We need each other. You know, conversations like what we're having now are super important.
Yeah. People to hear your story. I mean, just to know you in the deep, intimate things. I mean, you use that word. It was interesting, like, because I think I'm meeting more and more men in my coaching, in my life, close friendships, where we have these emasculating moments. And what we do with those, I mean, this is either the key to our personal growth, or it's the road to addiction. So I was curious, just, you know, for a man who's experiencing that in his life, you know, what were some of the things that really helped you to really, like, how did you, because I'm sure it kept coming up, and how did you address that? And what, like you said, the work outside of just, you mentioned sharing, but what were some other things as well? Yeah,
sure. Look, there was always a glimmer of hope that I couldn't let go of. You know, I couldn't let go of the idea that there must be a way for me to heal, you know, to be on a healing path. I must be able to function.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it was in intimacy, sexual intimacy. I was like, there must be a way for me to be able to sort this out.
Because Jem, I just want to make this point because it's interesting. Most people will want the quick fix in that moment. How do I avoid that pain? How do I get around it? How do I take the pill? Yeah. And it sounds like you didn't do that.
No, well, I tried.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I tried to have a quick fix. I tried to imagine that I'd have an enlightening moment when I go, oh my God, I've worked it out. Everything's better.
Yeah, right.
But I think you have a combination of both. I think for me anyway, I did have an enlightening moment.
Yeah.
It was in a North American Indian sweat lodge.
Yeah.
On Aboriginal land here in Australia. And I had an out-of-body experience. And then I had a very vivid and kind of prophetic, wasn't really a prophetic dream. It was just a super vivid healing dream. And I came out of this night of this out-of-body experience in the sweat lodge and then the dream. And I realized, this is when I was 40, about the age of 40, 41. And I realized for the first time in my life, wow, I've had a deep-seated belief that I'm not enough. And so I wanted to know about how I can change my wiring, how I can change my brain. And I just started reading all these books. One of the books that was a catalyst for me was by a guy called Joe Dispenza. You've probably heard of him. Joe Dispenza, and the book was Evolve the Brain. And it was talking about the plasticity of the brain and how we can change our beliefs. And so I read a bunch of books and I heard about just putting it on high repeat. So when you say something, so for example, to say the sentence, I am good enough, whether you believe it or not, when you say those words in that sequence, I am good enough, the corresponding neurons have to fire together to say that sentence. So when you say that sentence repetitively, and it takes time, man, this is where you got to roll your sleeves up and do the work. Those neurons start to wire together, which means they're a path of least resistance. So it's a thought that fires as a reflex thought. It fires automatically, right? Yeah. It becomes a belief. When you have a belief around something, you distort or adjust the information you're receiving from the outside world to match your beliefs. Yeah. Right? If you have a belief that life is tough, you're going to experience a tough life. If you have a belief that people are untrustworthy and nasty and out to get you, you will meet people like that. If you have a belief that people are generally lovely and kind-hearted, that will be your experience of reality, right? So our beliefs shape our reality. So when you start to form a reflex thought through just rolling your sleeves up and going to do the work and putting it on high repeat. Man, I said this sentence out loud every day, hundreds of times a day, and it took about 6 to 12 months before the neurology started to wire, that I started to believe my own hype. Yeah. Any moment when I wasn't with someone or I wasn't going to get locked up for being a crazy person, I was out loud over and over again. I'm good enough just the way I am. I'm good enough just the way I am. I'm enough. I'm enough. I'm enough. I'm enough. And I didn't even believe it to begin with. Right. Yeah. Right. And now that I've wired this, I'm like, how could I not have believed that? How can I not be enough? Of course I'm enough. Right. Just the way I am. Yeah. I'm exactly the height that I should be. My eyes are exactly the color they should be. My heart is as it should be. My level of intelligence and wisdom is exactly as it should be right now. It'll be different one day, but right now, and so, and so to answer your question, to anyone listening who wants to create some belief change, you got to do the work. Right. Out loud, and so I used to think that mantras or affirmations were some kind of woo-woo hippie or Eastern traditional thing that didn't really do anything. And I've learnt that I was wrong. Affirmations very literally do create, beliefs in your mind when you repeat them enough. And that then changes your version of reality. So I've got affirmations that I say. Now it's a daily practice for me. I meditate every morning and then I do my affirmations and then I get in the shower and then I get on with my day and, it's become a way of life. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. As you're talking, I'm sitting there wondering, and I remember going back to when you said your dad really kind of stole your innocence. How is this like process and thinking for now having two sons, and how you speak to them and helping them have that same affirmation in their own life? Yeah. Look, I'm doing my best to, to upgrade the software and be the next version, 2.0 of what my dad was. And look, and I don't feel like my dad stole my innocence. I feel like my innocence got stolen, but he didn't do it. He didn't do it to me. He wasn't thinking, right, now I'm going to screw up my son. He just lost his temper. Right. He just had a human moment. And he was only ever trying his best to the best of his ability. Every time he hit me, he didn't know how to discipline me any other way. He was only doing what he knew how to do in that given moment. And that doesn't mean it was always nice or kind. He was also a very loving man as well. Right. So with my children, do I make mistakes? Hell yeah. Lots of mistakes. But what I've really been, one of the things that I really care about is communication, and hence the book. And I've really tried to establish a relationship with both of my boys, who are becoming young men now. They're 18 and 16. Oh, yeah. Where they feel like they can talk with me about anything, and they do. And necessarily they'll have some things they keep to themselves because, that's a part of your sense of autonomy, is that you have your own world, You don't have to disclose everything. But they certainly feel safe enough to talk with me about everything, you know, and they tell me what they're up to. And the younger one's kind of like me, you know, he breaks rules and he tells me,
yeah,
you know, hey, Dad, I've tried this, or Dad, I'm thinking of trying that. And, you know, some of the things I wish I didn't hear. I wish I didn't know that you'd just done that, but you've told me now. But no, we have a beautiful relationship, and the communication is very open and flowing, which is super different for me. For me, with my dad, I couldn't tell him anything. I couldn't tell him I was smoking pot. I couldn't tell him I was, you know, stealing alcohol from his bar and drinking when I was a teenager. I couldn't tell him any of that. I couldn't tell him about my anxieties, about my worries, about my, you know, me trying to figure out life. When I was anxious or down as a teenager, I couldn't tell him. Couldn't talk with him about any of that sort of stuff. Right. You know, whereas my boys talk with me about all of it. So
yeah, because I just think it's interesting just having that thought process. I mean, in my adolescence, I had such poor narratives going in my brain about myself. Right. If I could have someone older to stop, you know,
yeah,
you are worthy, you are good enough, like that.
Yeah.
That helping me train my mind in that context.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad that I've been able to do that for my boys, because it's wired in them that they are exactly who they should be, and they are completely enough just the way they are. You know, yes. Both of them.
Yeah. So yeah, Jem, let me, I just would love to hear the process of then starting the book. What led to then? Yeah.
Look, I've always loved writing. You know, I've been writing songs since I was a kid, and poetry, and I always had a feeling I'd write a book. You know, and then you start on this coaching journey, and you know, you are your own brand, and everyone's saying to you, you should write a book, and I'm like, I'll get to it, you know. Right. And I started writing something autobiographical, and I mean, there's a lot in this book. There's a lot of my stories in there, but it's not an autobiography per se. There's just stories to exemplify the strategies around communication that I share in there. And I started writing an autobiography, and I went, no, I'll do this when I'm 80. I don't need to do this now.
Right.
I want to write a book that's more helpful for people. And, you know, with thousands of hours of coaching, there are some common themes that come up for us humans. And one of them is that we trip over in communication a lot. Yeah. You know, whether it's in relationship with your life partner, or whether it's with your team at work, or whether it's interdepartmentally inside an organization, or whether it's, you know, political or geographical or cultural, we're tripping over in communication. And I think communication is so important. You know, without communication, we wouldn't have been able to evolve as a species.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't the fastest, fiercest animal on the savannah plains. We were vulnerable. But the only reason we could evolve as a species is because we could figure out how to socialize, work together as communities, and help each other evolve, right? And that's through communication. So communication underpins our ability to manifest an idea into reality. You know, I mean, Einstein's genius understandings of the universe and the mechanical workings of the universe would have amounted to nothing if he couldn't communicate it.
Yeah.
So, you know, and, you know, Elon Musk's, what he creates, he couldn't have done it if he couldn't communicate his ideas. So communication is ultimately important, but we forget about that and we trip over in it. So I wanted to write a book on communication and more conscious communication. So being more aware of the communication itself, you know, being more aware of the purpose behind the communication, and, you know, to be able to lean in and seek to understand.
Yeah.
You know, rather than queuing up to have your say, rather than queuing up to defend a point of view or to, you know, to react to what the other person's saying, to really be able to just soften and listen and hear, try to hear them and try and seek to understand, you know, this. Anyway, so I started writing about communication, and then I had a book writing mentor, and she said to me, you need to pick an audience because the book's beautiful, but it's too broad. And she said, I think men could really do with this right now. And that just landed with me straight away. And I went, Oh, you're right. You're really right, because I know it's the same in the States for you guys, Cartwright, but here in Australia, the culture indoctrinates men under this patriarchy, these structures, these systems, and we get indoctrinated into old stereotypes of what it is to be a man. Right? Suck it up, put on a brave face, harden up, toughen up, be a man. Vulnerability is a weakness. Don't cry like a girl. All of these things. This is what our boys get taught. And to survive, they have to do this, right? So we're teaching our boys to devoid themselves from their emotional selves, from their sensitivity, from their connectedness to others. We're culturally, we're creating men who are resilient. I'm doing in inverted commas, but it's kind of a brittle resilience. It's a veneer of resilience. It's like, I'm tough, but inside they can be falling apart, but they've got no one to talk to. And so the male suicide rates are horrible. It's serious what we've been doing inadvertently as cultures, what we've been creating. So I started writing this for men, going, wow, I think men really do need this, because there are behaviors that have been accepted, abusive, horrible behaviors that have been accepted by our culture, like rape, and not even as serious as rape, just the way that men treat women, or weaker men, the way that men treat weaker men. For me, it's really upsetting and unnecessary and dysfunctional. And I think it's time to upgrade. I think it's time for us to evolve. We don't need to behave like that to survive. We just don't need to, right? We can be much more human-centric and much more aware and much more emotionally evolved and much more sensitive with each other and still survive. We don't need to be violent anymore. But sadly, still a lot of our culture is. I'm doing my bit to try and help men reconnect to their emotional selves, to their vulnerabilities, to their sensitivity, and to be able to give them tools and strategies, very real, literal, go do this tools, to help them communicate more effectively, whether it's with their partner, their children, their teams, their business, themselves, to communicate more effectively with yourself.
That's so needed, Jim. I mean, a lot of the men I meet with, it's interesting because we got to live up to the stereotype. We have to honor that. So honesty is low. We are all very dishonest. About our feelings, what's going on, to the point when we have a blow up in our marriage or at work, we don't know how to communicate why it happened, but we were just lying about what was going on. So true, man. So learning to communicate where I'm at, what I'm feeling, like with especially like our spouses, it's just so valuable. I got that feedback as a man, like in my late 20s, as a low communicator. And the truth of it was, I was afraid to be honest. Because I had to keep up the image of, I've got it figured out. I'm good. I'm a man.
Yeah, that's so true, Cartwright. And it happens, and what you just expressed then is widespread. Widespread. So I think it's time for change, and things are changing. There are men like you doing podcasts like this. It's important. It's important.
Absolutely, and it does, and that is strength. Is what needs to be communicated. Vulnerability, honesty, expressing emotions, because it makes us human. Like you said, we're human. Why can't we act like a human?
Man, since having the courage to be honest, and to share my vulnerabilities, I'm the strongest I've ever been. And my resilience is it has integrity, which means that it goes to the core of me. It's not just a veneer. My resilience is robust. And I'm genuinely happy. Not pretending to be happy. And it's funny, because if I think back to 10, 15 years ago, if someone had have told me that I'd be on a podcast sharing that vulnerability of mine,
Yeah.
I would say, no way, there's no way I'm going to talk about that. I'm not going to put that in a book. I'm not going to put that out there. No way, man. That's just no. There are some things that people just don't need to know. Right. That's what I would have said. Mm-hmm. And now it's not about me anymore. I'm only sharing this story. It doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm resolved with that stuff. I've healed that stuff. I'm living a great life. Yeah. So I'm not doing it for me. Mm-hmm. It's not about me anymore. Yeah. It's about if I can do anything to help any other men or humans or anyone, then I'll do what I can do to try and help,
Yeah, that's great. So I'm curious about one of the things, because you've already mentioned it, your retreats up in the Himalayas, and I know you do other ones. So yeah, I would just love you to share my audience, some of what you do and why they're important. And yeah, it's just so fascinating. Himalayas, that's got to be a spot I got to put on my bucket list to get to.
Oh, absolutely. Come on the retreat, man. You'd love it. It's right up your alley.
Oh, yeah?
It's yeah. You'd love it. So look, the retreats, why do we go to remote and stunning natural locations? That's very conscious, very intentional. Mm-hmm. I think that when you take some effort to remove yourself from your normal paradigm, right? Mm-hmm. So to make the effort to fly to another country, to a foreign land that's very different to yours, and then to make the effort to get up to a place that's not easy to get to, that's part of the journey, right? The hero's journey to get there, metaphorically. But when you arrive in this village, I mean, we help you get there, but when you get to this village, you're not in your normal paradigm. So your mind is open and already open to the potential of expansion, right? And my intention is to then facilitate content, conversations, and share some learnings around self-leadership, some ideas that you haven't had before. And my hope is that you adopt some of these ideas and make them fit for you in your version of life. And that they change, enhance, upgrade your ability to be you when you get home, to lead, to love, to live, And so in the India program, you're away from home for 2 weeks. We get into Delhi. We do a bit of Delhi just so you can see that you're not in Kansas anymore. Yeah. And then we get up into the mountains and we spend 3 or 4 days doing content. We're in the foothills of the Himalayas, surrounded by snow-capped mountains, and it's just stunning in the forest up there. And then we trek for 7 days, and we go remote. So where we go walking, there's no other people. Yes. It's not like you're on a tourist trail going to Everest Base Camp with 1,000 other tourists. There's nobody where we go. We have pack horses carrying all the gear. We've got my local mates over there who are the guides. And you're off the grid. Your phone doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you're off the grid. Mm-hmm. And it's stunning, really, really beautiful. We're camping. It's rough. It's not for everybody. It's not, we're not staying in hotels. You're camping in a tent, and the bushes are the toilet. But it's cool, man. It pushes you physically, mentally, emotionally, but you're held as well. So that's the Himalaya one. That's stunning. And then there's one in Bali that I used to run just for women. Some female clients had asked me to run a women's retreat, so I did that for years. The Conscious Woman, it was called, in a stunning 5-star, beautiful Balinese resort in remote North Bali, up in the jungle up there. We're opening that up next year to anybody who wants to come. Mm-hmm. I've run a meditation retreat in the deserts of remote Northwest Australia. Mm-hmm. We were booked to run a retreat in Costa Rica, that for you guys, right? So closer to home for you. Mm-hmm. And then COVID came, and so we lost our deposit, we lost the booking. But anyway, we got off pretty lightly compared to some people. So yeah, man, that's the retreats, and they're beautiful, and it's the themes that we talk about. It's about a reconnection with self, and the ability to be able to design your sense of self. Mm-hmm. We talk about a reconnection to the greater system. How do I access flow? How do I access ease? and therefore be able to create success in my life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a reconnection to a sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What is my purpose? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do?
Right.
You know, we go there, and then a reconnection to others. So we teach human behavioral patterns, how to read people's behaviors, how to communicate more effectively, how to honor people's different behavioral styles, you know, compassion, empathy, connection, communication, all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, that's the theme of the content on the retreats.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Jem. That's really good. And it's interesting. I'm trying to picture myself there
Yeah.
in those mountains. Well, I appreciate you coming on. You know, I know you're getting your day going all the way over there. So I, do want to let you go, but I'd love for you just plug, more of what you do and where people can find you.
Yeah, well, you can find me through my website, jemfuller.com, JEMFULLER.com. We are creating a community of leaders. If you're a leader, even a leader of yourself, if you're an entrepreneur, a sole operator, or if you lead a team, we're creating a community of leaders, and you can join that. We're creating a group initially on Facebook. I don't spend much time on Facebook, but I have a team who's building this community for me, and I go on there regularly and share what I'm hoping will be helpful communication strategies for leaders. So there's that group. We're actually launching an e-course for leaders specifically in America. So I'm doing the time slots that will work for the USA, and that's a course in communication for the modern leader, post-pandemic leaders. So that's launching soon. If you're interested in that, just contact me through the website, jemfuller.com. Just go onto the contact form and say, hey, Jem, I heard your podcast. I'm curious. Yeah. So there's that. There's also, on all the social media, Instagram, you can follow me there. I post there regularly, and LinkedIn, and it's all just Jem Fuller. You'll find me under that. Yeah.
With an E. Yeah.
With an E.
Yeah, gotta make sure.
Yeah.
With my American friends, they're hearing Jem.
Yeah. JEM. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jem, I appreciate you coming on. It's I loved hearing just your process, your story, and just where you are today. So it's really cool. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Cartwright. It was really lovely to meet you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Men Are Forged podcast. Summer's coming to an end, but I know some of y'all are still getting active. You're still going outside. Man, fall's going to be just perfect. And I've got the active wear for you for a brand with a mission. It's called the Three Nails Clothing Company. It's at threenailsclothing.com, and they've got great shorts, t-shirts, and hats for you to really help you be more active. But also, it's a brand with a mission to spread the kingdom and to share the vision of Christ. So you can go to, like I said, threenailsclothing.com. But when you check out, make sure you put in the Men Are Forged promo code. That's one word, Men Are Forged, all caps. That is because of this podcast, guys, because you're listening here, you get 10% off by using the Men Are Forged promo code at threenailsclothing.com. So go check out that, get some great active wear, and I appreciate y'all listening, and I'll see you next time.